So I'm going to start. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Mount Gretna School of Art Lecture Series hosted here in Pennsylvania, Chautauqua's Hall of Philosophy. We're always honored to be a part of this setting and tradition. And I'd also like to thank Stinson Strout for his support of our lecture series this summer, and take some time to thank some of our other corporate and foundation sponsors. Mount Gretna Arts Council, Purpose One, Ronnie G. DeHaven Fund, that sponsors one or two of our scholarships each summer. The William Drindle Fund of the Mount Gretna United Methodist Church. They helped us build a wheelchair ramp and also funded one of our scholarships this summer. I want to also thank the Thomas A. and Georgina T. Rousseau Family Foundation for their support, and the Rosemary Beck Foundation. Now I'm going to introduce Morgan Hobbs, who came down here from Philadelphia. She's going to be our visiting critic for the next 2 days. And as our students get to hear her give her talk, they'll be thinking about that as context for her visit to critique their work. She's a curator and educator in Philadelphia. She's a graduate with a master's degree from Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts and a BFA from the University of Central Missouri. She's the co-founder of Automat, which if you don't know, there's been kind of a burgeoning of these artist-run galleries around the country and in big cities, self-driven galleries, and they're not all successful, but Automat has received some notoriety and some funding from the Fine Arts Venture Fund. So I'm sympathetic to her kind of organizational and entrepreneurial drive. She's curated shows, and she now works at the Gross McLeod Gallery as the assistant director. And a lot of the artists who teach here have shown at Gross McLeod Gallery. It's always a favorite stop when we go visit Philadelphia. She's shown work regionally and nationally. I'll name a few. The satellite projects in Miami, 33 Orchard in New York. We'll be passing by that gallery on our New York visit. Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts Museum, and so forth. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. I'm sure she'll have more to fill you in. Welcome, Morgan.
Thank you all for having me here too. I'm really thrilled today. It's been super relaxing and beautiful and wonderful. Okay, you don't have to say it out loud, but does anyone in the room know what velvet cat means? Like one person. Cool. I guess sorry. So, as Shay was saying, I work at Gross McLeod Gallery, and I just want to emphasize this. I think my curatorial practice is so hugely important to my art practice, and I'm not going to get super into the details of my work during this lecture, but for any of you that I'm visiting with later this week, either in the studio or if you want to pull me aside, I'm happy to talk about the ins and outs of working with the gallery. And when you come visit Philly, I'll probably see you on the 16th. I also would like to make special note of an interview series that I do on Instagram, and it's on the Gross McLeod Instagram page. And here I'm interviewing Scott Noel, but I should have put Kurt Moyer up there because I interviewed him recently. We all met last week. And then on the right is me and my colleagues. So anyway, I hope to see you in the gallery, and I'm happy to chat more about that if you have questions. So, all right. Glad I'm showing this picture on the right because I just saw that Melanie Johnson is watching via Zoom. So hi, Melanie. So just to give you all a little sense of my background, I'm from the Midwest, like some of you, and I went to the University of Central Missouri. This is a picture of the outside of the Art Center, and Melanie, whose drawing is on the right there, she taught here last summer, and she was very pivotal to my upbringing as an artist, and taught me how to draw and paint and work from observation. And I think that that was just very crucial to my abilities as an artist, although I've kind of embarked on my own path since then. So, but here we have a couple of images from my senior show. And I like to start here. I really feel like that some of the formative moments of my interest were visible in this work. Of course, I didn't know that at the time. I only see that in retrospect. But every time I give one of these lectures, I'm sort of piecing together the moments that meant something to me. I'm obviously leaving a lot out, just so you know. But here we have two works from my senior show. The one on the left is about like 40 by 40. The one on the right was about 60 by 60. And already I was experimenting with different modes of working, different languages of paint, abstraction versus representation. And some of the things that I still to this day think about are a claustrophobic space or a shallow space. Obviously, like I was saying, the conventions of imagery, the language of paint, the conventions of formalism. At the time, I was also very active in the anthropology department, and we actually went out to do a historical archaeological dig in a spring called Hurdle Springs. I think it was similar to the history of Mount Gretna, where there was like a spring and people would come and visit and work on their health during the summer. So here we are on a dig, and this is a picture from like a postcard. And then on the bottom, I found a funny picture of Dr. Yeldon, who was my anthropology professor, so I had to share him. So I kind of just liked anthropology. It was interesting, and I just kept taking classes, and I didn't really like think too much about it. But I'm really glad that I did, and it really helped me to think about material culture, which I don't think that we think about painting and art and drawing as material culture that much, right? I don't hear it talked about all of that much, at least in like the studio setting. But I think that being a part of this department and getting a minor impacted me, and we will talk more about that later on in this talk. So in 2013, I went to grad school at HAFA, and this is the first thing that I made when I got there. So obviously I was like, I'm just gonna keep going with what I know, and it's gonna be great. Like, I've got this down, I'm gonna like, and pretty quickly, all of my plans started to unravel. And part of that was that there was a show going on at PAFA. PAFA is a museum and a school, the first in America, which is pretty cool. And there was an exhibition downstairs at the time called The Female Gaze. It was the Linda Lee Alter collection. And I was totally moved by this exhibition. Linda Lee Alter, she's got kind of a particular taste or aesthetic that she collects. Obviously, she collects a lot of women and non-binary artists and trans artists. But a lot of her work that she collects, and her personal work as well, has a sort of like handmade quality to it. It's imaginative. It's maybe less like what I was trained to do. And I was really drawn toward it. And I just felt like that there was some sort of like warmth and sincerity that I don't know if you all feel that way, but I feel like that something about like the skill that I was doing was actually creating some sort of space between me and like some of the kind of the things I can convey otherwise. And that's just me personally, and I definitely, don't think that skillful work is bad work. Obviously, it's good. But I just felt like that there was something about the way that these paintings and drawings and this ceramic piece are touched and felt, and that started to really appeal to me. So I started to experiment. So this was the first oil painting that I'd made in a really long time. And it's called Look at Me. It was about 30 by 30. And I was still painting from observation, but I was kind of like letting myself take, artistic license. So as you can see, there's kind of like a black eye, and it's like making everything in the painting sort of point at me. And I started also thinking about the language of the paint again, kind of using like a drier brush to kind of scrape on paint instead of making every mark look like the same application, making things look ugly sometimes or kind of awkward looking. I made this painting that I called Six Shirts, and this one was also kind of partially from observation. I had a shirt that I just like bought at a thrift store, hanging on the wall, and then like I painted myself in the shirt, and then I painted the shirt kind of behind me at the same time. And I was really trying to get at some narratives like that, I was actually like having like this crazy time in my life, like, and I was kind of just like processing some of that, like through the painting and thinking about how complicated life and death and knowing yourself and knowing someone else's. I mean, it was very like open-ended, and I wasn't trying to necessarily pin down exactly what the painting was about, but rather sort of set some things in motion to be interpreted in a way. So of course it was, very pleasing that this turned out like a halo, and that the shirt was both kind of on the person, and then the person wasn't there as well. And I think that was really cool that all worked out so well. This one is called Six Sheets, and it's probably like 32 by 38 or something like that. And so I started reading about effective formalism. And actually I was reading a book called Against Effective Formalism. So it's trying to like disprove that you can create emotions through formalism or like shape, color. And I kind of disagree with that. I think that there's so much to convey, obviously, just through visual elements and their interplay with each other. And so I was really thinking about, the spots on a sheet being like chicken pox, and the green in the background being like a smell, and like the kind of awkward shape coming through being like a hospital bed. and also like the overall awkwardness of everything kind of having a certain quality to it. And so this was probably, this painting and this one were the first that I did totally from my imagination. So I started to just not have a visual reference whatsoever. And that is really scary, or it was at the time. But I realized that there was so much inside of me that I already knew about shape and form and color. And so this one's called A New Haircut. And obviously having a little sense of humor in my work, but also like trying to, again, kind of grapple with really, I guess, challenging subject matter and some stuff that was going on in my head. So I guess you all see the face here. This is presumably the reflection, but it doesn't really look like what you're seeing in the foreground. So yeah, I really liked that sink anthropomorphizing moment there. So I made this one called Sink as a Verb. And then this was getting toward the end of grad school. And I slowly started to kind of just completely lose the figure in the paintings. And I've sort of gone back and forth with having a figure and not having a figure ever since then. But these two, this one's called The Counterproductive Shuffle. And this one's called Your Request is Being Processed. They're about like 51, 52 inches high, maybe 40 inches across. And they were both sort of about writing my thesis and the stress involved in that process. So you know, my thesis was actually about the differences between painting from life, painting from memory, and painting from your imagination. So it was still something that I was very much thinking about and maybe trying on some level to justify what I was doing. So right after grad school, I was really lucky to have an opportunity to show at PAPA in a show that they just called the 1 Year Out Show. So it was me and two of my classmates, Tony Martlock and Nadine Zolfarnois. And we worked for a year, just as the title suggests, and put a show together like right after the annual student exhibition. So that was really crazy. We were actually like one of the last years that they did that because it's hard to leave grad school and then immediately put like a museum quality show together. And I told them like, I wish I had like 2 years or 3 or 5, but it was really cool nonetheless. We called it Giants in the Corner and Other Anxious Tales. And the reason why that idea came up was because we were showing in the PAPA Museum, and I had become so familiar with the collection at that point that I was already sort of thinking about like, well, who's going to be like in the other room, or like, you know, are they going to have like this painting up like in the downstairs or whatever? And we were talking about that in a meeting with one of the like museum guys, and he was like, well, why don't you just put some of the collection works in the show, which was such a good idea. And so really the show became about the anxiety of influence, which you all might know a little bit about. And this will come up later, but really like thinking about an exhibition and all of its various parts is very important to me, and more so as the more that I curate and the more shows that I have, I feel like thinking about the works in conversation with one another is almost as important to me as the individual works themselves. So this is my work with a Louise Bourgeois sculpture, which is so cool. I'm just showing off, but I just wanted to all see that. And at the beginning of working toward the show, I was still making work about sort of my stressful daily life or whatever. So this was a work about a fight that I got into with my red-haired friends. And this was literally my view from my like office chair, and like that was my boss being mean, and like this was my head turning into a computer. And just a quick note that I was thinking about again today, that I spelled like like A H H H and like down there. So yeah, I'm always looking for like playful ways to kind of add to. And then I made this painting, and this one was made like, I think probably the spring of 2016. But it was about the Pope's visit to Philadelphia, which in 2015, the Pope visited Philadelphia, and like 6 million plus people descended upon the city. And I happened to live in this apartment building on Benjamin Franklin Parkway, like right near the art museum. And if you can see those little dots right there, like that's people outside my apartment. So it was totally bizarre. And I saw the Pope from my window, which was cool. But this painting is called It's Not the End of the World. Because like I was like seriously freaked out. Like that's just a lot of people. Like I don't know. It seemed very intense. So yeah, sort of tongue in cheek, like not the end of the world, or is it? So this was probably my first painting that was sort of Philadelphia based, like something related to what was happening in the city. Became a part of a painting. And right across the street from where I lived is the Rodin Museum, and the Thinker is there. And so this was for a different show, but I decided to incorporate the Thinker into one of my paintings. So this is the Thinker on Mars, and a portrait of the Thinker on Mars. And these are really small, like 12 by 9. So then right about that time, it was 2016. So it was the election year. And that was just like, again, I mean, I think grad school and the few years after grad school are just like incredibly crazy times as you try to like set your life up. So for all these personal reasons, I was like having lots of experiences, and then also just the craziness of the election year became like a major part of my experience. And every day I was walking by, this is City Hall, that's Benjamin Franklin's head right there. And this is the Masonic Temple. And this is the inside of CAFA. So I was walking through these buildings with these kind of architectural details and elements that have this sort of like imperial grandeur, like, you know, they relate to all different periods in architecture, but, you know, arches and columns, and, you know, a lot of that makes you think of like ancient Rome. And of course, I was thinking about democracy and representative government and all these things. And I was also having like kind of a hard time painting. So this was like the first time that I was like, well, I'm just gonna like start coating Amazon boxes in paper mache. And I started making these blocks, and I really didn't know what I was doing, but the gallery that I work with, he like came down and he was really into it. So that kind of like made me think, a little bit more seriously about it. I think like there was a lot of like catharsis in making something out of like the literal physical news, you know, because you're like I was working with like pulverized newspaper, and so it's like been building these blocks that look like these buildings that, you know, house these big ideas and are supposed to mean something. And the blocks look really heavy, but actually they're really light because they're essentially just like a cardboard box with a layer of paper on top of them. It was new to me, and I didn't know how it fit with the painting, but I went for it. This is Red Rooms. So the DNC was in Philadelphia that year, and they reinstalled Philadelphia Cornucopia, which was made in the 80s. So it's basically this Red Rooms sculpto picturama of like George Washington and Martha Washington and Franklin, the founding fathers, like coming out of a giant cornucopia. So that was just very cool. The heads are like gigantic, they're huge. And I, you know, always love Gustin. Definitely one of my main influences, and even my influences influence. Like I can't get away from him and his imagery. And I was just looking for like a random picture to plug in for him, but this, whole stack situation definitely relates to what I'm doing. And yeah, the Guerrilla Girls are always like my go-to political artists. And so yeah, I've just been starting to think about like these, you know, varying artists that are, you know, trying to deal with really heavy subject matter, and sometimes in like a light-hearted way, the Guerrilla Girls would say, like, if you can get them to laugh with you, you might be able to get them on board with what you're saying. I guess what I'm about to show you is a lot more recent work. I'm kind of still what I'm like trudging along, trying to figure out, but I'm definitely trying to somehow merge like the paintings with the sculptures, like get enough overlap there that I feel like I'm one artist and not two. So this was an early attempt at that. I like worked with crosses as motif for a while, and shields. And I think a lot of my paintings like started to just be like one individual thing in the middle of a painting, and like not really like a narrative or like multiple elements in a painting. And so then I started to really like think about like one thing as a sculpture too. It just seemed like the next logical step. So this is called Side of Beef, because a friend of mine was calling it my beef cake. And it's actually from like a Marston Hartley painting / kind of like a Cezanne painting, like where there's like a figure standing in front of blue sky, and the sky starts to like come up to the sides of the figure because of the way that it's been painted around the edges. So that was the idea, and of course it looks a lot more like violent than that. This one's called Blue Bloods, which is another way of saying noble birth, that, you know, worth without merit. And I guess I was like thinking about like, you know, someone shaking a newspaper at somebody. And then all the while I was making like a bunch of these like cat on a pillow paintings. So again, like kind of an outlier. But I was still thinking about a lot of the same things, like, you know, this one kind of looks like a pumpkin, but I was sort of thinking about it like a mask, or like, you know, how something can look spooky but be like totally benign. And kind of same deal here. So then, fast forward to last year, and MGSoA, my gallery in the Hamptons, invited me to do a solo show, and it like I've been describing, like I feel like I have like at least two bodies of work going at once some days, and I was kind of like, I don't know if I could like put a show together right now, like, and but I just kind of kept making stuff, and I was like, well, it's just gonna be what it is, like. And so anyway, Bell the Cat, it means to like attempt the impossible. And it's also kind of a warning to understand like the feasibility of an idea. Basically the fable is that the Mouse Council is like trying to figure out how to know when the cat is coming. And so they're asking each other like who will put the bell on the cat's neck. So I had just sort of globbed on to that saying because I feel like, first of all, cats are awesome. But also like, I think myself and maybe a lot of you feel like you're attempting the impossible to get all your ideas together and have them mean something and make sense and be interesting. So here's some works from that show. This one says, it's as bad as you think, which I like it when things can kind of take on two different meanings, like, or like in this case, like, it's as bad as you think, like, so is it really bad? Like, or do you think it's bad? Like, or is it like not that bad? Like, I don't know. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but it's only as bad as you think. This one was called Just a Small Slice. And so I went to visit the space again at BSOP before, like it was like 4 months before the show was supposed to install. And I started having ideas, like, because it was like inspiring to see like, oh, like this wall kind of is hidden when you're walking in. So I started to think about the layout of the show, which was like really helpful for where I was at. So basically in the upstairs of the gallery, I have this painting when you're walking in, and then there's kind of like a wall behind you. And then this painting was sort of like, you're like immediately drawn to go look at the big painting. And then the slices, like the pie slices back there, like staring at you while you're like looking at, you know, the rest of the pie or whatever. So, I went through a moment of painting, like American holidays, which is another wing that I feel like I could like spend like a couple of years on. But this was obviously a Thanksgiving painting, sort of feeling like that the whole thing was about to like fall off the table, and like tablecloth is very like fleshy and kind of gross. This is actually like a really large painting. I think it's like maybe 62 by 68 or something like that. And then made like a small like collar. I just want to be like that crazy aunt, you know, that like wears like the holiday jewelry to like the party. So, but yeah, I definitely like want this to kind of look like raw turkey and like burnt carrots. Because yeah, I mean, obviously, if you know about Thanksgiving, it's another one of those American holidays that's like largely based on a total myth. And it's hugely debated and very problematic in some ways. And, you know, insulting to Native groups who certainly don't, you know, see the holiday as representing the experience of their ancestors. So yeah. Okay, and then this was the stack again, but I painted it for the channel, so we'll experiment there. And this is a bouquet of flowers, but also a skull that's like chattering its teeth. And then everyone was calling this Belle because they thought that Belle was the cat's name. And this was like on the show card, so they thought this was Belle, comma, the cat. This painting is called Night Charade. Again, that cross motif kind of coming up really abstractly to the forefront, kind of pulling you in. And then like, I felt like it was interesting, the representation of the painting kind of comes second. Like you're confronted with this sort of symbol. It comes up very abstractly, and then there's like a bunch of cats all running around and causing trouble. And this is a couch, and there is a hand right there that's turning on or off the lights. And this was the last painting in the show. Here's some install shots. So here you go. It's up to you if you think that everything worked out, but it definitely gave me a lot of things to work with in the studio, and sort of, I feel like for the first time, kind of solidified the sculpture as a part of my practice. Somebody bought one, which was like, okay, like, go ahead. And this last painting was like, I made it like in the midst of the other paintings, but it was like outside. It felt like an outlier, but the more I thought about it, the more I feel like that this is like an interesting direction that I'd like to expand on. I think the symmetry is obviously something that I've been working with for a while. And sort of the framing, like none of that's like super new. I guess it's just like being outside and not being in a domestic space or a undefined space is new. And, you know, it reminds me, this is Marsden Hartley's portrait of a German officer. This is Bertha Leonard, who actually showed at Grossman Fleet for a long time. She's a Philadelphia artist. So anyway, I'm starting to look at these folks as like inspiration for the next paintings and really trying to tell myself it's okay. So anyway, here is like this is like on my easel right now. It's not done. And this is a picture that I took inside City Hall looking up. But anyway, so I have like a new project that I'm excited about. And so I'm going to show you pictures and talk about it, even though it's not really like any state to like fully understand what I'm doing. But anyway, I have been like running around the city, and like, this is like all within just like less than a mile from my house. Like, there's like all these monuments and memorials, and this is under City Hall, which is interesting. This is the post office. So yeah, I'm just like seeing this stuff all the time. And these are two monuments that I always felt like were really related. This is Frank Rizzo, who was the police commissioner and the mayor of Philadelphia, and he is very polarizing. And one of the things that he did was actually bombed a neighborhood in Philadelphia. And when the neighborhood caught on fire, nobody did anything about it. So I think, like I said, very polarizing. I think, you know, I wasn't there, but yeah, I think it seems like pretty much not a good deal. So he is in front of the municipal building. This is like such a powerful picture. Then on the other side of City Hall, so he was facing City Hall, they put in the first monument to a Black person ever in Philadelphia, just in these last couple of years. And this was Octavius Cato, I think is how you say his last name. And he was a civil rights activist that was killed on his way to go vote for the very first time, the day that voting became legal for Black men. And I just want to point out their kind of positions, like, and how different these people are being their posture, I guess. And I don't know what that says about leadership. And I don't know. I feel like that the like monuments conversation like came and went a couple of years ago, but like I still obviously feel like it's really an important one. So I am working on a project for the Hamptons Art Fair right now, which is like an interesting place. So Jonathan from BSOP asked me to do one of the stats for the art fair, which like I think it was funny. I like don't know if he really realizes like what that's actually like what I'm moving toward in those works. And like an art fair is a place where there's like a lot of money and power and waste and, you know, also some good things happening. Like people are selling their art, people are buying art. But in some ways it seemed like a really funny place to have a sculpture that's starting to address, you know, meaning and monuments and democracy and civilization and the Anthropocene and, you know, all these things. So, but like, I'm still gonna do it. So this is like the first part of that project. And I'm not like settled on a way that the sculpture is gonna be laid out. But basically, I think what I'm going to do is like have these tools like kind of on the edges of the like installation and kind of have the whole thing feeling like it's either in the process of being destroyed or in the process of being put together, or both, kind of like. And I've been thinking about like there's like a few different philosophies when talking about, you know, the failures and attempts to improve, you know, American democracy or capitalism or whatever. Like, and so I guess that's kind of where this like idea has settled for this project is like, do we take it apart? Do we try to piece it back together? You know, I'm also just interested in what's going to be left of like our civilization. Like I said in the beginning, anthropology and archaeology have always been a side interest of mine. And reading about the Anthropocene and sort of like, there was like a fun podcast that I was listening to that was basically like, we don't know if we were the first like technological species, like this could have already happened and they like destroyed themselves and then we're doing it all over again. I don't know, there's a lot of unknowns and, you know, I think that like, at least I feel like those are the kinds of things that I like to make work about is, you know, the uncertainty and this kind of thing just spinning into something or multiple different narratives in the ways that they can possibly unfold. So obviously it's not lost on me that today is the 4th of July. So I made a video and I hope you all enjoy it. Here we go.
Hello, I'm curious about the process going into inventing things. Was it something that showed up naturally, or was it something that you actively cultivated?
Inventing like the imagery.
Yeah.
I guess it just came naturally. I don't know. I've always been like a doodler and, you know, drawing in the margins kind of thing. And I think maybe because I was trained, you know, so rigorously in seeing and, you know, painting and drawing from life, there were moments that I like forgot that you can just also just draw sometimes. So, you know, not a cop-out response, but I kind of think everybody can draw from their imagination. I think they should. I think my partner, who might even be watching this, is better at drawing from his imagination than I am, and he's not even an artist. So, yeah, I guess a roundabout way to say that natural and cultivated, probably some cultivated.
Hi. I was curious, you said something about still thinking that your work, I don't remember what word you used, but like still feeling like your work is meaningful despite it ending up in someone's bedroom. And I was wondering if you could elaborate on that. Do you mean like selling a lot of work, or like still making work despite it being maybe not the most aesthetically pleasing? I was just wondering if you could elaborate.
I sort of trailed off when I was saying that. What I actually meant was still being meaningful, even though I'm not painting bedrooms. Because a lot of my paintings were like literally people in bed for a really long time. So yeah, it's hard. No,
I got too deeply into that.
Yeah, I
Do you think about how other people would interpret your work? Because I feel like a lot of the motifs in your work are personal to you, and you might, you know, that your intention for behind the work might be different for how it might be, how it might come off as. Do you ever think about that? Like when you're creating, are you creating just for yourself, or do you think about your audience?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that this is like a core issue in contemporary art in some ways. Like, of course, we've probably all heard of like the death of the author and different ways of thinking about like that the author doesn't matter. You know, I think I have a balance between the two ideas. Like, I definitely, you know, do think about the fact that the intention for the work is to be seen, and sort of what can or would be understood by someone coming at it totally cold without knowing me, or knowing my story for it. So yeah, I mean, I think that like one of my professors in graduate school, Tom Cesar, used to say that like there's certain works that are like somebody like screaming with a megaphone, like, here's my message. And then he said like my work was sort of like a whisper or whatever. Like, and I'm okay with that. Like, I think that like different people are going to have radically different experiences. I'm sure there's tons of people that probably like, and they don't have that connection necessary to really get into the work, but that's okay. Like, it doesn't have to be all things for all people. Yeah, did that answer your question, I guess? Okay.
What advice do you have for someone trying to move from, I guess, painting from life to imagination?
Just do it. I mean, you could do what I did, which was sort of incrementally moving toward painting from imagination. Like I said, in those first two sort of self-portrait paintings, I was looking at something, but there was a lot of like, okay, like I don't need to go any further with this, and I'm gonna leave it open in ways that I haven't been okay with before, or I'm going to use like imagined color. Yeah, so that's like one way. I mean, you might surprise yourself. Like I also used to like do a lot of like citing and measuring. Like I remember this was like a big deal. Like someone was like, stop citing and measuring all the time. Like, do you ever just draw? Like, stop doing that. And like, I was like, okay, like, but it was like so easy. And I didn't realize like I could actually see the measurements. Like I had trained myself to do this stuff, and I didn't believe that I could do it. I was doing it the same way, feeling like that's what I had to do, and I didn't. And I also think like, you know, you're learning how to see and how to, you know, interpret what you're seeing and put that on the canvas. Like you're already looking away from what you're seeing. So you're already like not really painting from life. Like you can't just like look at both at the same time. So it's already going through you. So I don't know. You're closer than you think probably. And yeah, if I have problems with a painting, or like a lot of times with my space, like I really don't want like a literal space anymore. Like I want to either undo the space or flatten it somehow. But if I'm like really stuck and something isn't working in the painting, like I'll totally set something up so that I can like see it again too. So it's not like you have to do one or the other exclusively.
In a lot of your pieces, contradictions seem to play a really large role, whether these with the green shade.
Yeah, I think it's something that interests me a lot. I mean, even like the skull and the flowers, like, you know, life and death or whatever, like, and a lot of artists, this actually comes up in my Gross McLeaf interviews that I do. I feel like a lot of artists find two sort of extremes and try to hold on to both of them at the same time. And that can be like very fruitful terrain. And yeah, I mean, I think that it's like that, again, that sort of spinning meaning or like spinning uncertainty, or you can't ever really just say like, oh, this is what it is, like, because then something always, you know, can come in and undercut that reading. Like, I think, yeah, I like that. It's one of my goals.
Well, so you talked about the kind of like the public spaces being a big, maybe current theme that you're looking at within your work, and just experiencing people and then outside of your apartment, people experiencing the work in these public spaces. Do you think you will ever maybe mobilize some of the paper mache things or sculptures in different ways into those public spaces, even if it's not necessarily through like that megaphone way that you were discussing earlier?
I put some sculptures in a park near Philly, and I like documented them for a while, and then someone stomped them, which was crazy. Actually, I think they like stomped and like threw rocks on them. Totally unexpected. So I think that I think that's really interesting. Like I'm really like intrigued by the unexpected things that can happen when you have something out of the art space and in the public space. At first, I thought you were asking, like, mobilize them, like, make them into puppets. Yeah, I'm totally into that. I want to make costumes. Like, there's so many ideas. I wish I had like 10 more hours in every day. Yeah. like I said, the context for where the work is going to be seen is something that I actually find really productive to bounce off of. And the good thing about the blocks that I'm making is that I can reinstall them in different ways all the time. And I've some of them I've painted over 4 times, they've gone from gray to red to green, and so I feel that there's just a lot of flexibility to try a lot of different things. So yeah.
Thank you.